How was your weekend?
Well, I had a great time. I did a lot of reading. I had like a full day off where I didn't leave my house. So I was reading a lot. And I also sat down and watched the new Kristen Bell TV show on Netflix called
Oh,
Nobody Wants This.
I've seen this like trailer of it, and it looks so adorable.
It was great. I love Adam Brody and Kristen Bell. So I was like, I'm here for this romantic 10 episode arc rather than like an hour and a half rom-com. Like I'm kind of over those, but I like when you get more side characters, you get more like plot development.
Yes. And
So
you
it's-
can believe the love story a little bit more.
Yeah, there's like a slower burn.
Yes.
So it was it's 10 episodes on Netflix, and it's called Nobody Wants This, which is the name of her podcast in the show. She is a podcaster.
Oh, I love it already.
And I was like, oh, this has relevancy to my life. I'm a podcaster, except her podcast is about sex and relationships. But she does it with her sister, and they're both like self-identified slutty singles.
Okay.
And they're like in their 40s, like late 30s, 40s. So it's not like 20 something.
Right.
It's a kind of a different demographic.
Love it.
And so there's a lot of like podcast admin talk, like they're like potentially getting acquired, where they're gonna like be distributed by a big platform, and they talk about how they like run out of content because then Kristen Bell gets into this relationship with Adam Brody, who's a rabbi. So it's a rabbi and a sex podcaster is the plot, and I was like, God, I just love it so much. So there's a really great scene where they go to a sex shop because she has to pick up something for work, like a dildo she's supposed to review. And so she brings him, and then he runs into one of his like parishioners at the synagogue at the sex shop, and he's wearing like, they were like joking around, and he's wearing like a like a BDSM collar and like holding a whip, and someone's like, rabbi. So there's like, it's like great joke fodder for rom-coms. But there's a lot of podcast admin where they're like talking about what are we going to talk about, and I'm like, oh my God,
So relatable.
Well, we also spent some time at the bookstore this weekend.
We did.
I had a fun day. Saturday, there were a lot of people out. The weather was great. How was Sunday?
Sunday was good. It was like crazy busy from like 10:15 to 12:30, just like packed. And then there was a little lull, and then it was really steady the rest of the afternoon. There were still people in here when I was trying to close, so that's always a good sign.
That is.
Like people are out and about. And I was kind of worried because it was like the Packer game, and
for sure
it was a nice fall day where it was still warm.
Things to do.
Yeah. There was a couple festivals going on too, and
oh yeah, the Great Midwest Hemp Fest was down at James Madison. I do feel like that brought people like to the area though. Because there was like a ton of food vendors set up and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we have not caught up on Bookstore like behind the scenes data in a while, and that's one of my favorite things to talk about, so I thought it'd be fun. We had like an episode here where we were like, oh, what should we do for a topic, and I was like, oh, we haven't talked about bookstore data in a while. So
it's always very interesting.
It is, and I feel like not just as a business but as like a part of just an insight into the community, it's so interesting to think about what people are reading and buying and what we're talking about with people. So we thought we'd kind of dig into some reporting data and also just some anecdotal data of what we've been talking to people about, or like what we see fly off the shelves, even if it's not like a bestseller for the year necessarily.
Yeah.
It might be like we had a really weird bestseller of September, for example. So some fun insights, hopefully, for people who don't run a bookstore, and also just fun for us to talk about.
Exactly. But first, what are you reading?
Okay, I just read All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker.
You finished it because we've talked about it a couple times.
Okay, it's a long one. So
it is
just read is like a relative term. It is almost 600 pages long. And you had mentioned it before because you read it before me. Did you listen to this one or did you read it?
I did both because I had, I was.
That's right.
Yeah, I was double fisting it. Which is not something I've ever done before. Like listening to it and like picking up a chapter and reading it. And, But I feel like I got the best of both worlds because sometimes I struggle like retaining the characters when I'm listening to it. And I didn't have a problem with that because
you had read some of it
too. Yep.
That's fascinating. Because how do you know like what chapter you're on? And then you got to.
This is the tricky part. Like I always have to end on a chapter.
Right.
Like I have to finish a chapter if I'm if I'm listening to it or if I'm reading it. Like I have to finish the chapter before I switch to the other medium.
Is it easy to scroll to a certain chapter in Libro FM?
Yes. It's done by tracks.
Oh.
But like sometimes it'll be track 37 is actually track 35 because it has like the intros. But once you figure that out, then it goes by chapters.
Because that's the reason I never do it is I'm like, I don't want to be flipping around. And this book in particular has, it's almost 600 pages. It has over 250 chapters.
Right.
Because it is, almost every chapter is less than 2 pages.
Yes.
It's like these tiny little, it's scenes, it's short scenes. And it is such a sprawling story.
Cheeto chapters, which was coined in the finale of Book Pop Season 1.
And these little Cheeto chapters, and that's one of the reasons we picked it up was because of that customer recommending the book. And I did truly love the book. So I guess like top level, I could give a synopsis.
Yeah.
All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker is a historical mystery thriller that also it goes over the course of decades, following characters from a young age when a traumatic event happens, and also following the whole town and ensemble of people around them and that traumatic event and what the fallout is from that event and how they all evolve and where they end up. So I was reading it, and I think I said on the podcast last time that I was like super freaked out because the first section of this book is the traumatic event part. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a thriller. And so this little boy who was born with one eye and wears an eye patch and kind of like identifies as a pirate and is like 12 or 13 at the time. He rescues this girl who's being abducted. And this is like the 70s question mark.
Yeah. That's a good question. I feel like that's accurate though.
1975.
Okay.
So it's 1975. And this was kind of this height of child abduction. It was just harder to persecute those people and like find DNA wasn't like a thing. It was just harder to like track down wrongdoers. And so kids were getting snatched. God of the Woods is also about this, right?
Yeah.
Another great book that we loved this summer. This book is very different in that it also spans a long period of time, but it's less about the mystery of what happened because you kind of find out in that first section, like this little boy interrupts a girl getting abducted. He is instead abducted and is held captive for like 8 or 9 months. The police they're working on it and they're giving up, but his best friend, who's this little girl named Saint, refuses to give up. And she's such a fabulous, precocious character that was by far my favorite, throughout. And her whole story of, perseverance and of determination. She's so determined, and she like suspected this one person and would like stake out their house the whole time while this her friend was missing, and she would like go to the cops and just hang out at this little small town police station listening and staring at them and being like, why aren't you working on this, and trying to hold this chief of police accountable, who also becomes this important character in the story. So it's a very much ensemble cast, but for the most part, it's just the perspectives of those two characters, right? Of the little boy who's captured, and then his friend Saint. So Joseph is the boy, and they call him Patch because of his eye patch. And then Saint is the girl who is looking for him. She finds him in this very riveting, like she goes to this farm by herself to confront this evil doer that she thinks took him, and like it's so terrifying and a really hard scene to read. And I kind of like stopped. I stopped and started with the book because of that scene. But once you got past that, and she does actually rescue him, but the guy gets away. Or there's a big fire. They don't know that he got away. And Patch says that he was down there with another girl, like a young teen who saved him and kept him sane, but he was completely in the dark that whole time. He couldn't see her. He just heard her, and she would tell him stories of her life. And she was had this very fantastical point of view. And they give you little snippets of what their conversations were like, kind of throughout the book. You get to see the picture of what it was like down there for him. And this 8 months of his life defines the rest of his life. So he is rescued, but then he can't really reintegrate. He's obsessed with finding this girl. They never found her. People think he made it up, and it was maybe like a product of his own imagination trying to process it. So he is seeking her and goes through this whole lifelong journey of
trying to find
other, and then finds other missing girls, or is talking to families. He goes across the country talking to families of missing girls in the 70s and 80s. Then he starts robbing banks to give money to these families so they can help find their kids. So now he's being tracked by the feds. Meanwhile, Saint, who was always trying to get him back, right? Like, she got him back physically, but she never got him back mentally and emotionally as her best friend, because he was always there with that girl in his mind in that basement. And so she's always trying to help him and support him, but she ends up being obsessed with this, not only this case, but she becomes like a rookie cop at a young age, because she is just kind of obsessed with fixing things and finding people. And she uses that to become a really successful cop, to become a FBI agent, where she is actually becomes the one tracking down Patch when he becomes a wanted bank robber. And it all intersects in and it's all in 1 to 2 page chapters.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of reviewing the book as I've been describing it, and it's so much more even than what I am describing. This is a very surface level description. It was amazing. I genuinely loved this book. I struggled to give it 5 stars only because, like, I think I said 4.75 or something in Storygraph, because of the length. And I think some of it could have been a little more edited. But the picture that it paints is so, I mean, the title, All the Colors of the Dark, is so apt, because it really is like a beautiful mosaic of all of these different people and this huge mystery that's kind of unraveling all throughout the book. I will say those tiny chapters would mean that there's like this revelation, and then it jumps away from it, and it jumps away from it for like 6 tiny chapters. And it was a little hard to keep track of then. I was like, wait, I feel like, and then there would be a different revelation in the next chapter, but they would leave it right away.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was hard to keep up sometimes with all those little, and it was almost like it was trying to keep you off your toes or on your toes. But then I felt like I was disoriented, and I was like, if I don't read this all at once, I can't even remember what all of the little revelations are. So there was a little something disjointed about it that I can't quite, give it 5 stars of like, it came together perfectly for me. I wish that it had revealed things a little more smoothly, but I think that's part of the story. Anyway, that was my thoughts. I loved it. It was a tough read in a lot of ways, because it is about all these missing girls and their families, and this initial story that I found really just kind of like hard to get into. But there was a lot of really wonderful characters and world building throughout that really kept me hooked. And the emotional stakes were so high because you genuinely love these characters. Another really great character is Sammy, his art dealer.
Yes.
Because once he comes out from this basement, he kind of develops this relationship with this kind of seedy character he's trying to like picture this girl's face. He'd never seen it, but he'd felt it with his hands. And so he tries to paint her, and he learns to paint. He basically is self-taught, but he's given all these resources and this encouragement by this kind of seedy art dealer named Sammy. At a young age, he's given this, and then he becomes this famous painter as well.
Right. And so sells his paintings to earn money.
To give back to these families and help the searches, and is never about money for him. And he also refuses to sell his paintings for a long time. And so there's just amazing plot lines that all weave together really well. And it's only like towards the end when it's trying to climax that the climax felt kind of disjointed to me, I think.
I feel I've been waiting for you to finish this because like
I know,
ending,
I really want to hear what you're saying.
And I don't want to say anything that's a big spoiler, but so I might just cut some of this out. But when you find out about the child that she was pregnant with.
I know.
I feel like that was almost a bigger revelation in it than like him getting caught.
I agree. The fact that there were so many things like that. There were mysteries that you didn't even know were going on that it revealed, or like the chief of police and Dr. Toombs's romance and how
it changed the entire story.
It changed the entire story. And I remember reading a lot of that end thinking I would love to reread this, knowing these things, but it took me so long to read.
Right.
So it is a one that has a great ending.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me that when so if you want to cut out some stuff about what the ending actually is, I think we can tell people safely because you told me that like it has a satisfying ending. It is genuinely, you're so stressed along the way, and it follows these characters for decades, and they are making tough choices in that you are like, oh, what are you doing? Or it feels right at the time, but you know there's going to be consequences, right? They make choices with huge consequences that you can see, and then it jumps to the consequence, and that happens too. So it's tough to watch all that play out, but the ending is so satisfying.
Yes. My What Are You Reading is a little less layered.
Maybe you want to talk about it for 20 minutes then, like I just did?
Yeah, so mine is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. It's very, very different.
By whom?
By Lori Gilmore.
Okay.
Which, if there ever was a book written in a Stars Hollow-esque town, it's this book.
Love it.
But they call it Dream Harbor. And Jeannie, who is the main protagonist, she inherits from her aunt, who just decided she didn't want it anymore, this cafe called the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. And Jeannie comes to this town and she has to figure out how to run a cafe. And the first person she meets is this farmer.
Sexy single farmer.
Sexy single farmer who's delivering her gourds.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, I'm just going to laugh all the way through. But there's like silly little things that are happening, and she's got to figure out what's, making noise at night. And they do this stakeout. So they're building this cute little relationship. But he also has this past of heartbreak. And it's also this small town that really has this farmer's back. And he lost his mom at a young age. So he's kind of been raised by this little town. And Jeannie's leaving this traumatic event that happened to her in a big city and trying to start new. And it's a cute, cozy fall romance read. And I can't go on for 20 minutes about it.
That's probably for the best. Did you like it? I mean, like
I did. It was
compared to other romance.
I mean, it was no Emily Henry, but I could really picture this town, and they had like a cute ensemble of characters that really brought color to it, like the next door pub owner who wanted to buy out this cafe, and there was just like the bookstore owner who was super adorable and like grew up being friends with the love interest. And I mean, there was like a farmer's market, and it was just cute and cozy, and it was everything I expected it to be, being called the Pumpkin Spice Cafe.
I love a cozy fall romance, like a seasonal thing.
Yes.
Because I love reading like a Christmas romance or like a Halloween or fall romance or even a summer romance, right? Like
absolutely.
We should say that one of the reasons that you read it is because
everybody else loves a seasonal cozy.
Yeah, we've been getting so
too.
many requests for this book because this came out last fall.
Did it?
Yes, 2023. And I know that because there is a new Dream Harbor,
sure enough,
#2 that just came out this fall. So I ordered that too.
Good call. That's very interesting. I wonder if it's because the second one's coming out that there's been like a revival of interest in the first one.
Or maybe just a seasonal one that if you missed it last year, you can pick it up this year. But yeah, I love a seasonal cozy romance. It was just a funny one where I'd come in and you'd be like, someone else asked me for Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and you loved just like bringing it up. Like, yes. Now it's a third.
I feel like I put it in the cart like 2 weeks ago, and you hemmed and hawed about whether or not. I think I
just made a joke about it. The cover, and I love like a cartoonish romance cover. Like I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, but it's particularly like cheese. You know?
Yeah, it's very orange.
Yes. And I do think I have I don't know. I have a little bit of I love a romance, and I have no judgment of that. I probably would like the book. I think pumpkin spice in general.
You don't like pumpkin spice?
Honestly, is the turnoff for me. That is the thing that I don't like. But I think that book sounds really cute.
Yes.
And we're going to have it soon. I think I had ordered it when you told me to, but it was so popular that it got delayed.
Yeah,
especially because that second book was coming out. In the series.
That was the Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Lori Gilmore.
So let's talk, I guess, a little more about bookstore stuff. So we know everyone's been asking for the Pumpkin Spice Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one that a bunch of people have been asking you for, and you've been selling a lot of.
The Power Broker?
Yeah. Just to go in a completely different direction.
It's very random.
By Robert Caro.
And it did celebrate its 50th year from publishing.
Yes.
So I guess that's a mile marker that people are paying attention to.
But the fact that people are reading this
brick of a book
and buying. Maybe they're buying it more than they're reading it. But I think the buying it seems intimidating because it's like a paperback book that costs $25 or something because it's so thick and dense.
It's so heavy,
It's so heavy.
Because neither of us have read it.
And probably won't.
And I definitely won't. The description is everywhere acknowledged as a modern American classic, winner of the Pulitzer, Robert Caro's monumental book makes public what few outsiders knew, that Robert Moses was the single most powerful man of his time in a city in the state of New York. In the telling of Moses' story, Caro both opens up an unprecedented degree of the way in which politics really happens and the way things really get done in American city halls.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that so many people want to read something so dense about that topic, but they do, and we're selling a ton of it, and good for them. And like you said, it's the 50th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
So it obviously still speaks to money and politics today.
Right. It'd be really sad that things haven't changed more than
to make that book less relevant.
Right.
Another one that I think anecdotally has been interesting to watch sell a lot of is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, yes.
We have like the mass market versions of this fantasy series because it's such a long book and all of them are so long that the trade paperback version is just like really huge and really heavy. And the mass market version is still kind of a little brick. It's like 3 inches wide. But we sell, I mean, so many per week that I have to keep upping the order. And we only can keep one on the shelf because they're just chunky little guys and we only have so much room over there. And there's a whole shelf of Brandon Sanderson already.
Right.
So I can't afford to have more of just one book, right? So we keep them in the back, and then like I feel like every day I have to go grab a copy of The Way of Kings, which is the first of the series. The whole series sells well, but the first one really has been surprising me all summer.
Yeah,
since we got these mass market ones in. And I think part of it is there is a new, I think the 5th book in that series is coming out later this year. So people are maybe like, all right, I got to go do this. You know, I got to either reread it or I got to go refresh myself or I'm going to start it for the first time because we sell a ton of the first one. But it's another one of these things I'm like, this is an older book. It's like it's a long book. It's a chunky little version. It's definitely a series I want to do as a fantasy person, but I have a hard time picking up long uncompleted series after getting burned by Game of Thrones. And if the series is incomplete and they're long books anyway, like, okay, well, I'm going to forget what happened by the time the next ones come out. I kind of want to wait for it to be completed, and then maybe I can do like a full read through of them then. So that's where I'm at with that series in particular. But yeah, another really randomly popular book that we sell a ton of.
Yep. Do you want to go through the best-selling books of last year?
Sure. Well, I printed that one off just to kind of think through how to predict what the best-selling books of this year would be. So, for example, one of the bestsellers from last year, Iron Flame, which is the second book in the Fourth Wing series by Rebecca Yarros, and it didn't come out until November. But we sold so many of them in November and December that it still made our top 5 of bestsellers of the year. So then when I was looking at that, I was like, oh, well, that means a book could still come out later.
Yeah, this year.
That isn't out yet.
And totally topple.
And still topple like our current list. So that's kind of why I printed it, was to just look at those trends about what kind of things we can expect. Because what we want to do is try to predict what our bestsellers will be by the end of the year. And we can look at what they are so far this year. But we know that there are lots of big things coming out. The fall is a huge publishing season for like big literary books that people are excited about.
Yeah.
For example, Intermezzo by Sally Rooney,
which I had to get my copy of.
And it just came out recently, and we sold an entire case on the first day, which was really cool, but kind of unexpected because I feel like not a lot of people are in tune with like what day the books come out.
Right.
Like I knew we would sell a lot of that over the first couple of weeks because people would be in the store being like, oh, the new Sally Rooney is out. I didn't know that everyone knew exactly what day that book came out, and they all came in that day.
I was surprised too. And I love Sally Rooney. I've read a lot of her this year alone. And I felt like I was just getting targeted on social media by this book because it knew that I loved Sally Rooney.
So maybe social media really did educate people on when
I think it did. I think it wasn't just me that was being targeted.
I didn't see it a lot, but maybe my algorithms are different.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know.
So that was one that was really cool that I was like, oh, people knew when it was coming out. They came to get it that day.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a contender for
one of the bestsellers
of the year based on how many we sold like week 1. So I think, and that obviously wouldn't be there yet because, but I think through the next 3 months, we're going to sell a ton of those for the holidays as well.
Another one that's similar that isn't out yet is the new one by Robin Wall Kimmerer, her follow-up to Braiding Sweetgrass, which sells very well in the store, and that was published in 2013. Her new one is The Service Berry, and that's going to be published later this fall. On November 19th, it comes out. But I think people are going to be really excited for that one.
That's going to be a big holiday gift, too. I think it's like a shorter book. It's a little bit smaller sized. And so I think it'll look really great, I think, as the hardcover when it comes out. The cover looks really beautiful. I agree with you. I think that is a good contender for bestseller, even though it's not going to come out until 6 weeks before the end of the year, because we're going to sell so many of them for the holidays.
Yeah. 4,000 Weeks. That author also has a...
Yes. It's kind of like a follow-up, right?
Okay. Like the meditation.
It's something else instead of Time Management for Mortals. Yeah, Meditations for Mortals. 4 weeks to embrace your limitations and make time for what counts. So I think it's a little bit more how-to than 4,000 Weeks, which doesn't have as much like explicit activities you should do to help yourself. I think this Meditations for Mortals is going to be a little more like directive. And I think that's cool. That's almost like a companion piece to 4,000 Weeks. I'm going to definitely read that and want to own a copy. And I think that is another great one. It's also 4,000 Weeks is an interesting one in terms of our sales, which are always really high. It was one of our top sellers last year. And it is also like one of my biggest like staff pick hand sells in terms of when people tell me like looking for nonfiction, I kind of want to think about if anything in the genre close to 4,000 weeks, I will recommend it to them. If they like philosophy, history, time management, self-help, I'm like, look, any of these things, psychology, you're going to really get something out of this book. So I think that has been a big factor that it is still a bestseller for us, even though it came out in 2021.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we look at when we're looking at our sales at the bookstore is like, what impact can we make on the sales of a book based on its location in the store, based on our own hand selling and interactions with customers. And I think one of the biggest ones we can do is put something on our staff picks shelf. Yeah. People do really look at that. And when you look at our sellers so far this year, that aren't related to events that we've done. So there are definitely bestsellers that like, yep, we went to, the Wisconsin Book Festival, for example, we're one of their partners and we sell books for them. We will sell a lot of those books.
Yeah,
so
and that will impact our sales.
That will obviously
overall.
Impact sales on a book. But if you look at books that we haven't done an event for, I think that's where it's really interesting to see like specifically what our store layout impact is. And 5 of the top 8 of our sellers so far this year, not including event books, are staff picks. So I feel like that shows that we really do make an impact with that hand selling. And that's something that if you're aren't in the book industry, maybe you don't realize, but like getting recommendations from people in bookstores and like just hearing people talk about books or reading a little blurb on like a shelf talker of a book, which we have like a whole staff pick section right by our checkout area. That does, I think, really make a difference to people. They want a recommendation from a person, and that's what we love to do. So anyway, I think it's so cool that we are clearly making an impact, and it shows it in the numbers.
Yeah, I think that's something we see every day, people coming in here asking for a recommendation. And it's one of the funnest things about the job, to be able to recommend the books you love. And also it makes it kind of a little mystery or a hunt. You need to figure out what's going to intrigue. Puzzle. Yeah.
They're like, okay, I need something for my mom who likes this and who's already read that and doesn't like X. And you're like, okay, how do I check all these boxes?
Yes. Yeah.
It is fun. It's a fun challenge.
Yeah.
So I guess an interesting thing to talk about is the difference between our bestsellers so far this year and our bestsellers in Q3, which would have been the summer, essentially, the summer months. And you can see things that are trend up during the summer, like romance. But then there's also books that maybe came out last year that are their bestsellers of our year so far because we sold a ton of them in the first half of the year. But they might get overtaken because, so for example, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store is a really good example. It's a staff pick. We both read it. We loved it. It was a really big deal last fall, and we were still selling it really strongly throughout the first half of the year. But I think it's died down.
Yeah.
There's new stuff coming out. It's no longer on our like Midwest bestseller radar. It's kind of over in historical fiction now. And that's one that the sales is going to, kind of drop off and continue to drop off, I think, over the
rest of the year.
Yeah, until the paperback comes out. And then I'm sure we'll have a resurgence. And that also affects sales data, right? Is like some of these books some best-selling books aren't on here because maybe the paperback came out halfway through the year. So then the data would be split. The sales data split between the hardcover the first half and then the paperback the second half of the year.
Sure.
I think Fourth Wing is a good example of that. The paperback just came out of that. And I think neither the hardcover nor the paperback is going to necessarily make our end of year like top 5 for sales just because they're going to split the ticket.
Although I was tempted to buy a paperback, although I already own the hardcover just because
it's so cute.
It's so cool.
Did you see the story that's one of our customers posted?
I talked to her.
Did you?
Yes.
I loved that story that she put on Instagram and I reposted it because she was like, well, Rebecca Yaros has tricked me into buying a third copy of this book.
So she had the original hardcover.
Yep.
Then she got the matching one.
The special edition. Holiday edition last year. Now she also got the paperback.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, I totally get that. I feel that way too. The dragons on the sprayed edge of this are so great. And a lot of the original hardcovers, like that original printing with the dragons, that was kind of before it blew up. So then it didn't have dragons on it after it blew up. Anyway, I think it's really interesting to think about these things and maybe.
Right. I do too. It's fascinating to see who's coming in to buy 3 copies of the same book. Because
Exactly.
I also feel that like, you know, it's a pretty book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, speaking of pretty books, we did like the TikTok of all our special editions.
Yes.
And including some classics that
we have beautiful like gold leaf edged versions of.
Mm-hmm. And we had customers that came in hours later being like, where's that copy of Dorian Gray? Because I need that book. It's beautiful.
I love that anecdote. And that also goes to show like marketing, not just where you put it in the store, but like what you show off to customers on your social media will impact sales directly.
Absolutely.
Something else we think about in the bookstore industry is not just like raw sales, but the number of turns. So turns is a term that is basically measuring how many times you sell through a book or through a section of your store over a certain period of time. So I look at how often we sell through like our nature section over the course of 6 months, for example. And that will be changing all the time. But if you look at averages or like seasons, you can see trends. And knowing what your high turn categories are in terms of like it's selling through really well, and knowing what your low turn categories are where it's stale and it's sitting there and it's not getting sold through as quickly is a really important part of our business. So we want to keep things fresh all the time, and we want to make sure that our high turnover sections get a lot of attention, get a great location. Maybe they are high turn because of their location, and maybe maybe it's so good that it could go to a slightly worse location and still maintain its turn, and you can give something that really high desirable location that's like right at front and center that needs a little love.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you pull a book out and you put it front and center on a shelf and it hasn't sold all year, and then you sell it that day.
Yep.
Because visibility is such an important thing in a bookstore, and the more face out books you can have, the more they will sell, but you need a ratio where you want a certain amount of inventory. So these are things we think about all the time.
We did that with our dystopian fiction section.
Yes.
We gave that new life because it was kind of tucked away at the corner of sci-fi.
Yep. And we put it out on a table and it started selling through like way faster than what it had before.
As it should. I love dystopian fiction.
Me too.
There's
and that's
so
part
many
of
good. Yeah,
that's part of why we featured it, and especially in like an election season, and when so many of those books are really prescient and topical, and they're classics, like
and
things
some
like,
of them banned.
Absolutely, it fits in with our banned book themes as well. So we love dystopian fiction.
Yeah.
That might be a table we switch up again in the future, because I think again it's one of those like high visibility spots. Let's give something else some attention, but I've been really happy with it for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know what our number one highest turn category is? Can you guess?
Ooh.
It's a little quiz.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Think smaller.
Think smaller.
Section wise. And
poetry?
Book size wise.
Travel. Oh, pocket. I knew it was pocket. That was stupid.
So, well, and that is, I mean, I think that's a great example. Our pocket books, we have this table, it's front and center. And we've really tried to expand capacity on it by like adding different shelving and rotating through the books that are on there, but it still sells so
fast.
well.
Yeah.
There's great gift books on there, and like humorous books, or like poetry by cats, or just like mini versions of classics. And they sell so well consistently that I was like, I'm never going to switch out this table.
Right.
This is too valuable.
And it's such an array of different topics. Like there's philosophy on there. There's like nature on there.
Self-help, poetry, comedy, comics.
Right.
Yeah. It's a really great little...
I
knew you knew. That's
I knew. That's frustrating.
But it's also an example where like, and we've talked about it before with that table, where when you have something that has a really great turn rate, maybe you should think about how you can expand that, because it's obviously meeting the demand, or even maybe not quite meeting demand. Like you could maybe even get more sales out of it if you really invest more space into it. Similarly, if something has a low turn rate, you might want to not invest more space, or specifically like, return some things. Basically, all these books we always think like they have to earn their space, right? Yeah. Like we were redoing some gift cubes and you were like looking at sales for the different items. Like you are not earning your cube.
Yep.
You are getting demoted from the cubes because you did not sell well on the cube, and we're going to try something new there. And that's how we always keep things like fresh and exciting, and hopefully it's fun for people to come back and again to the store, and they're always going to see something new.
Yes.
Because we're reacting to it. Do you know what our lowest turn section is? This surprised me, so I'd be very surprised if you could guess it.
What is it?
It is humor.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
And you know what? Humor is on a bottom shelf corner section right now that when I ran that data for the year and how that is our lowest turn section, I was like, that might be a great indicator that we need to rotate it to a little more visible of a place so that it can get some love, because we have some great humorous biographies we keep in our humor section.
Yeah.
David Sedaris.
I was just going to say.
I think I have like every book by David Sedaris in there because I love him. But yeah, so that's an interesting tidbit. If you're a humor fan, maybe check out that section next time you're in the store and you can give it some love.
Right. Very interesting.
So what do you think will be one of our like top 5 sellers of 2024? We didn't really go down the list yet. I guess like we could look at what they are. So our top seller so far this year is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone.
When we did our episode of the top selling books
way back in April or May.
Yep. That was also it was still at the top then.
It's still, the champion so far. It's been hanging in there all year. It's been really consistently selling, especially when the sequel came out.
Everyone on this train is a suspect.
Yes. And the author is Benjamin Stevenson.
Yeah. Benjamin Stevenson. And he's also coming out with a holiday mystery.
Love a holiday mystery.
Everyone this Christmas Has a Secret.
Is there like holly leaves on the cover too? I bet it's so cute.
There's twinkle lights.
Love it.
And the O in Everyone is an ornament. And that's going to be out October 24th.
Oh, kind of early. I guess they start dropping holiday stuff end of October. I also have to give a shout out to our second place book, which is only one copy behind our first place book. And that is Still True by Maggie Ginsberg. Now, I did filter out books that we have had events for because I was like, we haven't done an event about Still True. But then I was like, oh, wait.
We're constantly.
We have so many events featuring the wonderful Maggie Ginsberg that I think, including things like going to Anne Garvin's Bummer Camp, where she was a visiting author, and I sold books there. And going to a book club with her last week, as recently as that, where we sold like 15 copies. So I know that is kind of cheating to leave Still True on the list.
And she's also a staff pick that I hand sell all the time.
Exactly. I feel like we have like earned these sales.
Yes.
And the fact that she's so close to number 1, I did not want to discount her and like take her off or put an asterisk next to it because we have done events with her, because that is a fabulous ranking for a Madison author. And that's my secret hope, is that becomes, that like stays in our top 5 and that we can maybe even edge it up and really sell it around Christmas such that it can be one of our number 1 bestsellers of the whole year.
As well-deserved position.
Yes, we absolutely love Still True by Maggie Ginsberg. Unsurprisingly, Funny Story by Emily Henry is in 3rd place right now. But that has also died off.
Yes. So that came out in April and everybody was rushing to get that as well. We had it stocked up. I bought a copy.
Same.
We did a whole show just about it. And it was a great seller, great story. Loved it.
So I feel like Funny Story might be one that kind of dies down and I don't predict will end up being in the top. But Happy Place was last year. Although it was like, Happy Place was top 10 last year. It wasn't top 5. Our number one seller last year in 2023 was Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. And that was also the year that the movie came out about that. It was just like everywhere. It was like, Oscar bait, and it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it had been out, that's a book from, I want to say 2018 or something like that. So it had been out a while, but it was something that everyone was talking about. Everyone was recommending to each other. We were recommending it. I loved it. So that was unsurprising, I think, as a number one, even though it's crazy that our number one best-selling book would be a nonfiction,
right?
True crime.
Interesting.
Because
for sure.
we are, a lot of our staff picks and what we sell is a lot of fiction and fantasy, but
which makes the number 2 bestseller of last year make total sense.
Unsurprising. And that was Fourth Wing, the hardcover. Sold a lot of those.
And I anticipate Onyx Storm, when it comes out in January, to be a top seller for 2025.
Definitely. We're going to have a whole release party for Onyx Storm. I'm really excited. Just like we did for Iron Flame last year, which I think helped get it up into 4th place last year. Iron Flame was, even though it came out in November. Oh, I should give a shout out to another Madison author, Jamie Paxton, because Absinthe Underground right now is holding it down in position number 5 as one of our best sellers. So we said Still True. Maggie Ginsberg is number 2. But I think due to a lot of me hand selling Absinthe Underground, because I love it also, just like I do Still True, and we have both of those on our staff picks, that it has really created consistent sell-through for Absinthe Underground as well. And I'm very excited because I have an arc of the new Jamie Paxton. She co-wrote it with Rebecca Podos. So that one doesn't come out till March 2025. But I will probably read it this year because I'm really excited for it.
I think this is a good time to remind writers to send Lake City Books advanced reader copies.
Heck yeah. We will talk about them on the podcast if we like it.
Yes.
So bet on yourselves.
Send us a copy.
Also a great time to remind listeners in general to pre-order books that they're excited about. You can do it really easily through lakecitybooks.com. We will then have it ready for you on the release day. And if it's something like Onyx Storm, the new Rebecca Yarros, we're going to have a release party, and you will hear all about that and get invited automatically if you've pre-ordered the book through us. So I feel like you get more out of pre-orders just than having the book ready for you day of. But I hear a lot of horror stories of people like pre-ordering books through Amazon or other online companies where they're like, oh my God, it didn't show up for like a week later and everyone else had already read it. If you do it through a local bookstore, not even just us, but do it through us. But doing it through local bookstores is how like we have people advocating for you and like getting those books here on time. Like that is our whole job, is to try and get those books in your hand, and you can come pick it up the moment we open on release day.
Yeah.
So I feel like, or we'll drop it in the mail the moment, day 1 of release day. But if you really want it that day, go pick it up at a local bookstore. They have that for a reason. And if you pre-order it, it also helps the authors to advocate for them in terms of like getting on bestseller lists, and knowing how many people have pre-ordered the book helps printers decide how many to print. So then they won't run out and create supply shortages. So pre-ordering is really helpful. And for bookstores too, it's really helpful because we're getting that money up front and we can then buy more books in the meantime, right? For you to have this lovely choice from. Yeah. And then you get it for free the day that you pick it up because you already paid for it. Girl math.
Girl math. On the lines of girl math, mention our rewards program because it pays to buy books when you shop at Lake City Books.
Definitely. If you have an account with us, it's a free rewards account and you get $5 off for every 100 you spend. You can cash it in anytime you hit that amount. So sometimes you'll come in and you'll have $8.50 or, it's like kind of random amounts, but we keep track of all of it for you. Ordering online or in buying things in the store both count towards your points. So if you order it through us at lakecitybooks.com, you're going to get points from that as well. And yeah, it's just our way of giving back and making sure that people get a little something and like help pay for books, I guess.
I know that we recognize all of our regular customers and we want to give a little back.
We do. We love regulars. And if you have an account, then you are one of our regulars. Because then you come back because you want to use your points and you want to earn more points. You also, when you have an account, can sell us books. So we have used books here in the store. And those are all sourced from our customers. People bringing them in, and then we give you store credit to use on anything you want in the store. And then we can resell your books for cheaper.
Yeah.
Often 50% off the new price or even more. And then someone else can get that book for cheap and you get store credit to spend and everybody wins.
So this was a little recap of what we're selling at the bookstore.
Yeah. And a really long recap of All the Colors of the Dark.
Yes.
Which maybe really you can edit down.
Short recap of Pumpkin Spice Cafe.
Well, we'll see you all at the bookstore.
See you at the bookstore. Bye.
Book Pop Podcast is presented by Lake City Books. Produced by Jamie Anderson and Molly Fish. Edited by Jamie Anderson. Music and art by Lovick. Follow us on Instagram at bookpop.podcast. Find out more at our website, bookpoppodcast.com.